Hey, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you stopping on by to my little corner of the internet. But I am an artist, an illustrator, and I am trying to learn Clip Studio Paint to varying degrees of unsuccess. So I had an idea on how I can maybe try and optimize my learning experience in Clip Studio Paint. So we're going to talk about that, how I approach learning a new skill artistically that I generally am having a hard time with approaching figuring things out, while also just yapping and chatting about life, all the fun art stuff, and just having good vibes while we work on projects together. So get out your art supplies if you feel interested. Put me on in the background so you can listen to me yap if you so desire. Get cozy, snacks, beverages, whatever you need. And let's just get into the fun times and illustration of the day. If you've been around a little while, you might know that I have a clown mushroom girl OC for my Trumpet of Death. It is for my kind of alternative universe. Alternative universe implies that there's an original universe. It's my original story regarding a kind of imperialistic regime of mushroom people, and Trumpet of Death falls in love with the princess, Weeping Peach Mushroom, and they overthrow the government together, basically, but that's kind of an aside. I like Trumpet of Death's design. I really like her outfit, but I constantly find myself wanting to think about more fun clown fits that I can put her in and actually kind of play with the character design a little bit more. I'm not a huge fan of the costume design process for a character or a clothing design process. However, I also don't like my OCs to have one strict outfit. And I know that that's probably supposed to be something I'm better at, like a recognizable fit that makes them kind of easy to identify. But I kind of want them to have a full wardrobe. So while I'm not drawing Trumpet of Death because she has a big collar thing that would make the outfit design process a little bit kind of complicated, I did really want to kind of just play around with a different outfit for a casual one-off clown girl and maybe apply it to Trumpet of Death in the future depending on how I feel about it. So that's kind of the goal, is to just play around with a clown outfit, a simple, cute, kind of hot clown girl, and that was the primary objective, get the clown girl done in terms of the sketch. Now, the actual thing that I have been trying to figure out in Clip Studio Paint is my rendering style. I had a pretty good solid workflow for rendering in Procreate. I was very comfortable with it, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I didn't really have any issues kind of executing that process that I wanted to do. So, why can't I figure it out in Clip Studio Paint? Why can't I pass on my rendering process between programs? I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't figure it out. I don't know why, but rendering just feels impossible for some reason in Clip Studio Paint for me. And there are just small little layer features that I have not been able to figure out. So, I, being a predominantly self-taught individual, I was self-taught for many, many years before many years. I'm not even old enough for many, many years to be applied to my life. I was self-taught for many years before I decided to get a second bachelor's degree in art, and now I'm in a master's program where I receive effectively zero artistic guidance, and I basically show up once a week, if that even, and I say, here's all the art I made, and they're like, good job, kid. You can go back to being a hermit now. And then I go back to being a hermit for another week with maybe one check-in. So I'm once again basically completely self-taught, but if I so desire, I can email people and be like, hey, how bad is this? And they'll be like, oh, I mean, maybe you could fix this a little bit. But generally speaking, I'm basically just self-teaching myself, but getting college credit for it. That's my MFA experience. I will probably be making a video on that soon. I was originally thinking a week in the life of an MFA student, but since I only have to do at most one thing a week for my MFA, it would kind of just be an art vlog, and I don't know that that quite hits home. So it might need to be a month in the life, so maybe it won't be soon. I'll start it soon, and maybe I'll upload little clips here and there on like shorts to just show it and kind of talk about the process more. But I'm largely self-taught again. And so what do I do when I am self-taught? What do I do when I am trying to figure something out and I have no guidance? Well, I do one of two things. I Google it relentlessly and watch endless video tutorials while it not working in my own program despite following tutorials exactly before spontaneously combusting and crying on the floor. Or I make a new file and I just start drawing with one technique that I want to figure out or get more comfortable with in mind. And I generally call them just test illustrations, but the goal is to make a passable illustration while trying to finish or figure out a component of the program that I really want to utilize but can't quite figure out. Was I successful? Watch to find out. But my overall goal was to figure out a little bit more about the kind of auto-locking reference layer process that Clip Studio Paint has. Now, to understand this, let's talk about my Procreate rendering process for a minute, despite the fact that I don't have Procreate clips to show you because my iPad would literally die if I tried to do another new illustration right now. But I will describe it, generally speaking, briefly, and we'll talk through it. In Procreate, I had a very particular order that I would set up my layers. I would have one layer set as my reference layer, and that layer would have my filled in solid base color. So all future layers would be attached to and referencing that layer if it was for my character. I would do the same thing for a background if that was necessary and I had a background that I wanted to apply details to and wasn't particularly strict, right? Then my next method is to have mask layers or like clipping reference layers. I can't remember what they're called in Procreate, so that every layer is forced to reference that base layer. And I would just build up by the components of the piece, like the skin, the outfit, and then I would apply a multiply, overlay, and generally like a soft light layer to apply interesting lighting to the piece. But mostly flat colors with some solid shading, and then I would use multiply layers to have more fun with that. However, I generally used a triangle and a rectangular kind of painterly brush that had minimal opacity for that kind of shading process. That way I could build up layers, have a lot of fun with it, and ensure that everything looked good. Then I would apply a noise texture, and that would usually be it. If I have line art or a sketch layer that I want to have overlaid, I usually duplicate that layer, and then I will very, very, very lightly Gaussian blur that line art to add a little bit more oomph. And then sometimes, depending on the vibe of the piece, I would color the Gaussian blur layer so that it kind of had a colored glow to it. And it's really hot, and I 10 out of 10 recommend it. I am pretty confident I know how to execute that in Clip Studio Paint. That kind of layer, color, mask, everything, that I can do. I also have figured out how to ensure that pixels in the background that are not part of my colored and blocked area are not a problem. I have also figured that out. I feel very comfortable with that process, and I am good to go on that. So my line art is good. I can do that. My sketching is good. I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable lining and cleaning up a sketch layer. So what is my issue? What am I trying to figure out when it comes to rendering specifically? Not being bad at it. That's it. That's the explanation. Now, there are multiple aspects of the rendering process that I have yet to figure out and I have yet to understand. But What I wanted to figure out today in particular was how can I use a gradient on a specific layer and then edit that to kind of add some pizzazz. So like simple gradient layer, fine, good, yummy, perfectly fine, right? That was one goal. That I was pretty sure I'd be able to figure out. So I wanted to be a little bit possibly overzealous, perhaps a little bit ambitious, and add a second goal. And that is using the lasso tool to be able to color in areas, but I wanted to do it in a particular way that I am completely and irrevocably attracted to, and I cannot figure it out. I cannot figure it out. There are some artists, I've seen them do it. I know it is a possible thing. I don't know if it's possible in Clip Studio Paint, but I see them go and they lasso an area, they apply a light color, and then, or they lasso an area and they drag down with their pen. You'll see a little line appear and it'll automatically apply a gradient of the color they selected. That should be simple, right? I should be able to figure this out, right? No. No, I cannot. I don't know what button they're pressing. I don't know if it's possible in Clip Studio Paint. But if it isn't, I'm determined to find a way to do it in Clip Studio Paint because this is one of the most editable programs on the planet. If I can't do it, then there's a plugin for it somewhere and I just need to figure out what it's called. And that is my goal. Figuring out a component or a way to lasso and kind of color fill and overall just kind of oomph up a piece very quickly. And that's largely because while I do love my kind of tedious long-term rendering style, I love taking my time with the piece. I'm doing a graphic novel, and I've kind of officialized my graduation date to December 2026, and I'm already pretty sure that this thing is going to need to go to Webtoon or something, or a manga reading app, because it's going to have to come out in chapters. I ain't even out of the woods, and we're 9 pages in. And I don't think I'm getting out of the woods in my graphic novel for another 15 pages. That's a chapter, yo. What am I supposed to do? I ain't even out of the woods and starting the story for another 15 pages. This graphic novel is going to end up 500 pages by the time I hit all the story beats I want. I'm going to have a 10 book graphic novel series at this point. I might as well make a manga. I'm panicking, okay? I want it to be colored. I have color palette components picked out. I'm pretty confident I know exactly what I want it to look like colored once I have the line art done. However, I don't know how to execute that coloring technique. And the absolute last thing that I want to do as an artist is try and figure out my new coloring technique in my final graduate project, which is also a graphic novel that I truly, genuinely would like to publish somewhere on the internet for people to read and enjoy. That is not the time to figure out how to color for me, especially when I'm sketching, just doing rough sketches of every page right now, and I haven't even gotten to lining and cleaning up the graphic novel. I have ample amounts of time to figure out the coloring component. So, I really want to master gradients and the ability to lasso an area and have it color automatically. Additionally speaking, it is really important as an artist to have a workflow that you're confident and comfortable in when you actually want to create pieces. When you're learning and you're figuring stuff out, you cannot have a workflow and it'll be okay. You will be able to have fun and enjoy the process. But when you want to take art more professionally, or you really want to work on a large project like I am, having a workflow, a consistent way that you can do things so you're not constantly refiguring out your process is really important, not only to saving time, but to making the art process feel a little less daunting. When you know how you like to do things, you don't have to worry about, can I master this technique? Can I make this look the way I want it to? Because you have a workflow that you can rely on to at least hit a standard of quality that you will be happy with, or at the very least remove some of that uncertainty from the process, you know? And that's really what I want to figure out for Clip Studio Paint. I have my graphic novel in here. It is sketched out. It is started in here. This is the only program that I think will allow me to make a digital graphic novel without absolutely losing my mind. I have really enjoyed working in Clip Studio Paint for the sketching process, the lining process, and the black and white version of my graphic novel I think is genuinely going to look really good, and I'm confident in how I want it to look, how I want to render it. It's just applying the color to that I feel like I can't do it. And that is a very scary and unsettling process because this project's really important to me. And I'm an artist. I want to be able to finish my pieces. But every time I open Clip Studio Paint and I start a new project or I get working on a project, I find myself confronted with, I don't know how to color the way I want to color in this program. I'll just start a new piece or figure it out later or finish this when I'm in the mood. And that is what's stopping me from finishing my illustrations, is the feeling of, I don't know how to use this, so I'm just not going to. And that is a feeling that is very easily overcome by just figuring out how to do what I want to do, and I just need to set my mind to actually figuring it out. And what better way to do that than to experiment and play with the program itself? I'm very firm in the belief that yes, you can watch infinite tutorials to try and figure out the perfect art workflow, and that there are a lot of artists out there who have really, really attractive, beautiful workflows that would probably make my life really easy. However, I don't want to learn someone else's workflow. I want to learn the program enough to be able to develop something that feels right for me, and I want to try and avoid letting other people's workflow impact the decisions I make. So I'm very particularly trying to figure out things that I want to be able to do and trying to find tutorials for that specific execution. A workflow is the steps that you take to complete the piece, to complete the illustration. A workflow is the process you go through to achieve a final result. Now, most people will not see your workflow unless you intentionally post it in the corners and the abyss of the internet, but that'll go from how you decide to set up your layers, things you do to your canvas. Do you do what I do and choose a background color by paint bucketing a layer, or do you set your canvas to automatically have a gray background before you even get into it? That is a part of your workflow. That simple decision is one component of how you approach making decisions to complete an art piece. Now, layers, lining, brushes, all of that, color, how you approach coloring. Do you do it all on one layer? Do you do every component on a new layer? All of it is a component of a workflow. It is your personalized process to get from point A to point B. All of those steps in between, point A to point B, is your workflow. So when I say that I don't want other people's workflow to impact me, I want to be able to make a workflow for myself. I don't want to look at other people's workflow and try to copy and mimic it, because then it's not really optimized to me and my desires. And I think that that is kind of a trap we can easily fall into when watching tutorials on the internet for doing different things artistically. Instead of thinking for ourselves and trying to problem solve, sometimes we will find ourselves trying to copy something step by step to the point where we lose the ability to critically think, how would I actually like to do this? This will go for like complicated watercolor pieces or complicated coloring techniques and trying to like execute it one-to-one. Sometimes you need to just get the supply out and figure it out. And I think there's an important line between trying to figure out a technique and trying to figure out how to draw something in particular. So, like, if you were to Google, how do I draw a... I immediately blanked on anything. How do I draw a still life of a pomegranate? which I did not Google for my pomegranate video, and it probably would have made the pomegranate less ugly. But I enjoyed the process and I learned a lot. That is kind of beside the point. You Google, how do I draw a still life of a pomegranate? And if you follow every single individual step, you might get something that looks very similar to what's in the video, but you may have lost your own artistic identity and artistic style along the way because you were emulating something exactly. However, maybe you're trying to figure out, how do I get the texture of a pomegranate exterior in watercolor? And you kind of look up like texturing techniques for watercolor. And then you do the sketching process, start to finish, color it, render it, but you follow the tutorial on creating the texture you really want. Now you've learned a new technique and put it in your arsenal that makes you able to expand your skill set, but you still maintained your artistic identity and your own artistic voice throughout that process. So that's what I'm really trying to avoid and hone throughout this process. I'm trying to avoid watching other people's Clip Studio Paint workflows so that I don't find myself in the trap of losing something authentic to me, even if I don't know what that is yet. Because I have enough experience in other programs that I know I have a way I do like to do things, and I know my personal preferences and the way I want to eventually be able to do stuff. It is just figuring out the tools within the program that will allow me to get to that end point that I need help with. So that's what I'm trying to do with these illustrations. I'm trying to focus on tools that will help me get there, but not a particular process. I'm readily and willingly experimenting with the way that I approach figuring out the more intricate details of Clip Studio Paint and how I want to go about certain things, but I'm trying to figure out techniques, even if I don't end up using them, that will maybe help me streamline my process in the future. Clip Studio Paint is so much larger and a lot less intuitive than Procreate in a lot of ways because it was designed kind of to be more of an alternative to Adobe Photoshop. And Procreate was designed to just be a drawing app. It was designed to just be a place where you can draw. However, Clip Studio Paint and Photoshop are designed for design and vectors and kind of exporting large projects for large-scale companies. You know, it's not just about art in the kind of fun, personal sense, but it's also about creating kind of professional pieces that can be utilized to kind of streamline business-related activities as well. Now, that's not saying Procreate's not capable of being used as a professional platform, but it was designed more so for a fun artist experience than I'm trying to mass produce a bunch of book covers and I have a deadline of tonight at midnight and I want to crash and burn. You know what I mean? There is a bit more of a kind of industry standard vibe to Clip Studio Paint despite not being the industry standard, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so it's a lot less intuitive than Procreate and it's taking me a lot longer to figure out these processes, and I don't even necessarily have the vocabulary to Google everything that I want to try and figure out. And I think that that is kind of the largest issue that I have ran into while trying to do stuff with Clip Studio Paint. So let's talk about the one simple thing that I want to figure out really, really desperately, but cannot pull it off yet. I said in the last little section that we're going to talk about the one thing that I'm really struggling to figure out. However, I do want to step in and talk about kind of a mental trap that can kind of come up with the mindset that I am operating under right now and discuss how for some people it can be demotivating and how you should approach thinking about this philosophy in a way that'll benefit you in the alternative thinking method. So I talk about on my channel a lot how we need to stop caring about social media and what other people think about our art. We need to just create, and we need to not let numbers and art inspiration from Pinterest make us feel bad. Sometimes you need to just do it. A lot of the times you need to just do it. And that is kind of the philosophy that I operate under a lot of the time with art. I don't know how to do something, just play with it until it works. Don't know how to do something and want to try a new medium, don't Google how to do it. Just play with it first. Figure it out a little bit. Get familiar with it. I think that we as artists fear failure a lot. I talk about that a lot as well on my channel. And because of that, we will avoid doing something because we don't want to fail. I will gladly fail 20 more illustrations to figure out my Clip Studio Paint workflow because I know it's part of the process. However, for some people, that can be really demotivating and upsetting. And so sometimes it is kind of a little bit more important to focus on taking care of your mental health in a different way when it comes to creating art. Maybe you don't do a full illustration that you might fail. Maybe you make an entire page of circles and you test the things you're trying to figure out on circles instead of a full illustration. And you build up the application of that knowledge and you figure it out a different way. Maybe you don't experiment as wildly as I do, play around as much as I do, and you really, really focus on, I'm learning this one thing, this is the only thing I'm doing, I'm not doing anything else. That's okay. However you need to approach this to ensure that you don't crush your own kind of soul and motivation is the way you should approach trying to learn a new program. I'm a throw yourself into it and have fun type of person. I was only frustrated during this piece one time, and I think I cut it out because it probably would require a seizure warning, and it definitely was awful to experience as the user. I'm not entirely sure what the YouTube upload quality will do to it, but I tried to apply the gradient and I was on the wrong layer, so I hard gradiented my entire illustration instead of just the character, and I got flashbanged with a super vibrant bright orange on my entire screen worth of illustration, and it hurt my eyeballs. I'm very visually sensitive, and I could not for the life of me figure out what was wrong and why it wasn't working, and it was because I had the wrong layer set to reference. That was the only time I was frustrated with this piece. There were a lot of times where I was like, oh, that's kind of ugly. That's ugh. But I just had fun. And once I started to feel a little bit bored of the piece, but satisfied with what I had learned and what I had figured out, that was where I called it quits. Once the piece wasn't a fun experiment anymore, but it was still very much kind of something I could show to somebody and not feel embarrassed about, I was like, this is where it's time to quit. This experiment was successful, I figured out a lot, and I had fun while doing it. I don't put pressure on myself in these situations to create something worth praise and worth looking at. Would that be awesome? Yes. Would I love to create my next favorite illustration I've ever done while doing these? I mean, yeah, that'd be super cool. But it's about having fun. And as long as you're having fun, I think you're doing art the right way. And that's kind of where I always stand mentally on the kind of philosophy. If you're not having fun, you're doing art wrong. I think that's where it really needs to be. Maybe you can be a little frustrated, but when you feel yourself learning something new, you're probably feeling pretty cool about it. Even if it's not something super impressive. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to draw boxes in perspective. Or maybe you're trying to figure out just a basic 3-dimensional box. Just a box, right? You might not feel super cool when you're doing it. At first, you're like, wow, my lines are wobbly. I'm not connecting them right. But once you start getting in the groove of it, you're like, damn, I'm cool. I figured out how to draw a box in 3D. That's like kind of rad. And that's kind of how you need to feel about it. Like, the frustration will lead to the endorphins of success. But if you're just like, this is the worst thing I've ever done, I'm having a terrible time, I hate it, you should quit. Maybe not forever. I'm not saying quit forever. I'm not saying put the pencil down and never do it again. I'm saying take a break. Try something different the next day. Go breathe. Maybe even just an hour. Come back to the piece. See if you still feel that way. Do you still hate it? Do you still want to tear it into tiny pieces, light it on fire, pour acetone on it or something like that? If that's how you feel, maybe put that piece away. Put it in a pocket. You don't even have to look at it. Put it in the pocket of your sketchbook. Make a collage over it if you really, really hate it and it's in your sketchbook. Put some fun stuff over it. Maybe write about why you hated it all over it. But take a break. Maybe try a different project. It's okay to scrap a project. This project could debatably be considered a scrapped project because I definitely can do better. I definitely can do this way better if I wasn't using a gradient map to try and figure out streamlining processes. But that kind of defeats the point of the exercise because that's what I'm trying to learn a little bit. And so yeah, I can do this better, but I also saved the line art sketch. So I can just copy that line art into a new file and do this piece all over again. I have it saved. I can hide all the layers I've currently got and then just keep building in the same exact file if I want to. Which, if you're doing things digitally, save every step of the process that you really like. If you really like the line art, maybe just export it entirely to a separate drive, but duplicate that layer. I duplicated a lot of layers throughout this process because I wanted to keep them so I could go back to them if I decided, hey, I really hate this part, but I saved a step in the process I really liked and I can try again. And I'm probably going to play around in this file a lot more. And I am probably going to put this cute clown girl in a different file and try more techniques on her specifically. Because, like I said, I figured out the sketching process I like. It's the coloring that I don't like. And so this is kind of a coloring page I can keep using over and over again until I figure out what I want to do and how I like to do things. But if you're feeling defeated, destroyed, emotionally distraught, you're probably just going to need a break. Try something new the next day. Try a different medium. And if learning isn't fun for you in that moment, you're not necessarily learning wrong, but I recommend trying to learn a different way. Find somebody else's tutorial on how to do the thing you want to do. Try turning on some good music, blank page, playing around. I think that we kind of forget that experimentation and fun and just doing it and enjoying everything is an inherent part of creativity. We don't need to be masters at art. We need to just be our authentic, fun selves. And with that, we will create art that we like eventually. And so protect your mental health when you approach learning something new. This method works for me because I know my boundaries and limits for frustration versus pure unadulterated rage and desire to punch my computer and genuinely just having a good time. And I had a good time. So to explain the technique that I'm really trying to execute and master, I've talked about lasso a little bit, I think. I really don't honestly remember what the last 33 minutes of voiceover was about because I needed to wash my cat's butt because he is having dietary problems right now. Yay me. We will put a picture of Pumpkin up post-bath for your viewing pleasure. Nice and clean, don't worry, completely clean. But for your viewing pleasure, I will put a picture of the problem child up so you can enjoy my crisis. And at least have a cute cat picture out of it. But, basically, I am a gradient hoe. I love it. I love a good gradient. It makes me so happy. And it makes life easier for me, okay? I really like to, when I start a new project, part of my workflow is to put down a base color and then gradient the area I want to be dark, whether that's from left to right, top to bottom, bottom to top, whatever. I like to do that because it helps me create a mood for the piece instantly, and it helps me to kind of understand the areas I want generally a little bit darker. You can do this in a multiply layer, yes, but I usually like to do it just in a normal kind of layer and color, and then do multiply over it later if necessary to add oomph, because I kind of like my multiply layer to be a little bit more intentional in shadow. That's just a personal workflow preference. I know a lot of people multiply layer their gradient instead and put it over everything and then add details. But I kind of like that vibe before I even do my flat colors, and so that's kind of just where I'm personally at, and it's how life is, I guess. But overall, I really, really, really want to figure out how to lasso tool gradient. And I want it to just be a gradient of the color I have selected. And I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how to do it without a Gaussian blur. And I don't want to Gaussian blur it. I want to do it the way I see other people do it, where they lasso and then the line appears. The line appears where you put your cursor down and you move it in the direction you want your gradient, and it just happens. I want that. I can't figure it out, but I want it, and I'm going to figure it out. I swear I will die on this hill, or I will make it possible. I am not giving up on this dream, okay? Even if I never use it again, I'm experiencing this beautiful looking tool once in my life. I swear it. I'm determined, because I really, really struggle with brush stroke direction. So usually artists will have a brush, not usually. A lot of professional artists recommend having a brush that has a very hard edge on one side and a very soft edge on another side. And that is because a lot of shadows will have a hard edge and then they will gradient out in a soft edge. Hi, Cruz. My assistant Cruz has decided to join me in the mission of life. Hello, buddy. But basically, say you have a jacket and it has a big fold in it, right? The edge of that fold where it like creases is going to be hard, right? That crease in the jacket will cut off all the light to that, but then it'll soften as the light kind of moves past it. And so if you have a brush that's hard on one edge and soft on the other, you can just do one stroke and bam, you done. You got it. You got the shadow in. Like, that's a pretty solid shadow. You don't need to think a lot harder about it. Don't need to blur, don't need to smudge. And that can be really beneficial for streamlining and expediting a lot of artistic processes. So, why can't I figure that out? Because I have a chronic illness that makes 1, hand mobility very impaired, 2, Clip Studio Paint and I are at constant war with each other regarding all of the brushes I have found that have this design, and I have not figured out how to make a custom brush like this. And so I am kind of at the point where I would prefer to just avoid that issue by lassoing the area and having the gradient automatically apply. Because if you lasso that area and then you get that gradient to go within the lassoed area, 1, you can make it a lot bigger and more controlled than a brush. 2, you can add more dynamic shapes to the softer edge of it. So it kind of just makes the overall process a little bit more expedited, and you can have a more dynamic, sharp edge without needing to change the brush, kind of like direction. What I have found with all of my brushes where I try and do it is that they have a set direction that the hard edge needs to kind of be on. So it's hard to get a nice angle or a dynamic curve. So say for this piece in particular, I wanted to put a really hard, immediate harsh shadow under the edge of my character's breast, right? And I want it to follow that curve. I want light to be cut off right on the underside of the boob and then gradient out. I can't follow that curve because when I follow the curve, the brush is kind of not in a natural curved shape itself because it has a flat, hard edge. And it just kind of ends up jagged. And then when I try and overlay, it'll get darker in weird points. And I just, don't want to deal with technical issues where my brush doesn't do exactly what I want it to do the first time. I don't want to when I know that this exists and can be 10 times easier for me, and I don't need to worry about this issue at all. I just want it to work, okay? I'm determined to figure this out. I know it exists. I know I can do it. I know I have the intelligence and capabilities of figuring out how to do what I want to do. I just need to put my mind to it. So, did I figure it out during this illustration process? No. What I did figure out is that there are a lot of fun ways to use the lasso tool to create interesting shapes and multiply layers, and generally just have a fun piece. So this piece doesn't really have a lot of gradient to it, and I should preface this now, we're going to spend very little time looking at the final piece, because watching me use the lasso tool is probably worse than watching someone try to do long division for the first time without a tutorial. I think it's actually worse. I lose where the start of my lasso is so quickly, and then I'm just scribbling around trying to find the edge so I can use it. I'm really bad at the lasso. But that is something that is a skill I will hone the more I use it, so I'm not worried about my current struggles with, actually doing it well. That is an issue that I know I won't have an issue figuring out with time. As my kind of ability to use it expands, but also just my experience expands, it'll become intuitive eventually. That's just kind of part of, using a new tool generally. I didn't really use the lasso much in Procreate. I often found that it was frustrating because it was hard to increase the stabilization, and I have incredibly shaky hands, and so using lasso was generally very difficult for me in Procreate, and Clip Studio Paint has a lot more accessibility to it in that regard. It's a lot easier to stabilize things, to account for general difficulties in mobility that I found, and it has been very nice to customize it to my needs in a way that Procreate was just a little bit less intuitive to do. So, I didn't necessarily figure out what I wanted to do, and for the most part, I spent a lot of time drawing circles with the lasso tool and color bucketing them, and then getting incredibly excited about how fun it looked. So, it's very much not visually appealing to watch, and so I cut most of the coloring process out, and I'm going to just put the finished piece on the screen. Because there's no demonstration I can offer you to explain what I did, because I don't really know what I did. I didn't figure out what I was trying to figure out, and so I mostly just had fun playing with the tool and familiarizing myself with it when I realized that I think I need to do a little bit more research, and I need to maybe work in a different general region. So, overall, I spent a lot of time learning the lasso instead with this piece. Doesn't mean I, technically kind of failed my goal of kind of, figuring out this technique and what I wanted to do. Yeah, kind of. But also, I learned something else. And so, I want to say, while not the original objective, still very successful. And I did save the line art, as I mentioned earlier. So, I'm going to just do this exact same thing again, over and over again, probably with this piece until I figure it out, because I have a really general gradient idea. What is wrong with me? A general gradient idea that I want to do in certain areas, and I really want simplistic colors for this piece. So I'm gonna just keep working at it over and over again, or until I get tired of this line art and I make something new and then I repeat this process all over again. But I am really determined to figure this out. I just am struggling to find the vocabulary to Google applying a gradient within a lasso tool on Clip Studio Paint. Because every time I do that, it's like, here's how to use the lasso tool. I'm like, I got that part. Here's how to use a gradient, not inside of a lasso tool. That doesn't help me. It doesn't help me. Like, I know that I am like one word away from Googling this correctly, and I just need to keep at it, keep trying, keep experimenting, keep having fun. Clip Studio Paint is literally massive. I figured out the noise feature in this. I figured out the noise feature that I don't like in this. And so overall, I'm really like, I'm making progress in my journey of learning Clip Studio Paint. And I don't know, I think I did good enough. I still haven't figured out the rendering brushes that I like. And so I think my next goal is to maybe play around with a rendering brush and figure out which like main 3 I want to use. I have like a main 3 sketching brushes. I have some texture brushes I'm really happy with, but finding that blocky, not fully opaque rectangle and triangle brush, I think are kind of the next steps in rendering to get where I want to eventually kind of get. Aside from this tool, I'm feeling really good about where I'm at, and I'm getting more and more excited to use Clip Studio Paint. I'm feeling more inclined to turn on my drawing tablet and get going, which is a huge hurdle for me in general. I don't know if it's mental health related, but turning on the drawing tablet at first was so much harder than opening an iPad to use Procreate. It felt like a chore and a task. And so it made me uninclined. But now I get excited to turn it on, and I want to do like a digital doodle every day. Like I'm like, oh, I kind of want to turn on the drawing tablet and play around in Clip Studio Paint and do something. Which means that I think that I am making a lot of progress, and I am getting somewhere with this program that I'm going to eventually enjoy a lot more than Procreate overall. But it is definitely a battle, and it is not the easiest program to learn for sure, is what I'm learning. At this point in the video, from a visual perspective, we are a little bit less panicked and dead inside regarding the actual kind of tools more so. Like, I've talked about most of the parts of the program that are making me want to smash my head on a wall. And now we're just vibing with some of the line art. I use the exact same pencil for line art that I do for sketching for the most part. It's like pencil R, I think. And I find that it's incredibly good for the sketchy kind of style I like to do. But you can build it up and it looks good with other more kind of firm, smooth line arts as well. But I like a texture, you know? Like, texture is my thing. And generally speaking, I do more of a double sketch method nowadays than I do a proper line art approach. Yes, I do generally kind of try to have that second sketch be as close to line art as possible in a lot of areas, but I like to do some hatching in areas that I think just can have a little bit of pizzazz. I like to just kind of treat it like a secondary sketch, and I'm very comfortable making mistakes in this phase as well, and then just erasing and fixing it as if it's just like a trashy sketch. One thing that I take like 30 years to fix, and you probably wouldn't notice if I didn't point it out because it's kind of covered, is that her arm cuts off on her body, like where it connects, the one that's raised up. Her shoulder is like 10 miles above where the armpit line I've put in is. And then her other arm is very thin, not well formed, and just kind of sketched in there. Well, I focus on other details that I care a lot more about and kind of think my way through them. One thing that I'm kind of finding about Clip Studio Paint is I feel like I'm really not interesting when I'm actually just kind of recording my screen. And like I'm not providing a lot of visual interest or like doing things that are wild enough that it like warrants sitting and watching me do the project. Like, yeah, I'm just kind of casually sitting here sketching at my own pace, but I feel like this is something people only want to watch when there's a live stream of it, and not when they're like sitting down and watching pre-recorded content. Like, they want interesting, they want fun, good vibes, like to see more progress, but I'm such a slow sketcher, I think, that it makes me just feel really boring. This, I think, entire piece took me 3 hours to do with all the coloring, which I cropped most of it out because it was really just me failing for an hour straight. But I think in total, like, I reduced 3 hours of work down to about an hour and 19 minutes. And, like, I still feel like I'm not making enough progress for people to be interested in watching me do it. But also, this is the type of content I like to watch. People just slowly working on stuff, chatting, just kind of good vibes. I'm not much of a live stream person because I kind of feel like obligated to engage and chat during a live stream, and I just kind of feel like not me doing live streams, I've never done one, I don't know how I feel about it, but like watching them, like I want to participate in the conversation, but I also don't want to read the chat while drawing and stuff. So I don't know, I just, throughout this process, I just kind of realized that maybe I need to be a little bit more fun and like interesting when making my content. And I think that part of that is because the views have been going down on YouTube a lot more recently. Like, I'm having a really hard time breaking 100 views per video despite my subscriber count. And I think it makes me feel like I'm getting more boring. Even though I think that I'm just as boring as I've always been. So I probably shouldn't worry about it and just keep vibing. But I don't know, let me know if this was kind of like not interesting to visually watch, and I'll see if I could do something to create more snazz, fun, to the digital drawing part, because I have been approaching digital art a lot more recently, not just because I feel more excited to open Clip Studio Paint, but the mediums that I've been working with traditionally have been getting a lot harder on me physically with my health condition, and I've been having a much harder time kind of bringing myself to actually interact with physical materials because I'm finding it substantially more kind of difficult to grip the materials and kind of smudge things the way I want. And I don't know. I'm trying to find the nice balance between taking care of myself but still being entertaining enough that other people want to hang out with me, because I really do value my little corner of the internet and you guys, and I really want you guys to feel safe coming here and being creative with me and feeling kind of the good vibes. And so I don't know if the good vibes come when I'm just like casually lining a hot clown girl. I think she's hot. I really, really like her. If I were to actually approach this as a full finished illustration that I wanted to like print, I probably would make the skirt a crochet texture or try and approach a more crochet look to everything, but I'm not entirely sure about that, you know, like it's cute as it is, but I don't know, I feel like a crochet texture can be really, really fun, so I'm kind of on the fence about that one, honestly. I think I might do it for a finished piece. What I can do is I can like do all of my experiments with the same line art and then do like the ultimate drawing of this, like with all the techniques I learned that I like, and just kind of jive with that. But I'm really just kind of struggling to kind of figure out how to do textures the way I want to, and also kind of get the painterly kind of effect that I've been enjoying with the brushes. And so that's kind of where I'm at journey-wise. I don't really know what brushes I have that I enjoy. At this point, I might need to do a like super duper speed run reel of me going through every brush I've downloaded to try and find the right brush, swatching them and then deleting them and see how many I'm left with, because I just am not finding the brush of my dreams. And I suck at making brushes. I really do. I made a brush stamp in Procreate for my signature a while back, like a long while back, and it took me like 45 minutes to figure it out. And I'm pretty sure like most people can do it in 10 minutes. It should have only taken like 10 minutes. And I can't even imagine learning how to do it in Clip Studio Paint. Another thing about Clip Studio Paint that I really like but I haven't figured out yet is how to draw with a line opacity and thickness that makes the paint bucket tool and I get along, because I'm not quite able to jive with it. It doesn't quite fill in all of my areas, and I think it's because I have a kind of gapped, sketchy line art style nowadays. I used to do really intense, well-connected lines, but I find personally that I feel as though a sketchier, not quite connected line art feels a little bit more real. When you're looking at a finished illustration, it feels more human and more personal, and something about that has been super attractive to me recently. Largely probably because AI image generation, but also just because the human hand-drawn quality feels much more kind of magical recently, even outside of AI image generation for me. And so even when I'm doing traditionally done line art, I've been feeling a lot more inclined to leave gaps in my lines and have a little bit more kind of looseness in my expression. Maybe this is just what maturing looks like, is not connecting every line together. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's an immaturity kind of thing, but something about the lesser effort? Wow, am I okay? Something about the lesser effort of a more sketchy kind of line art and drawing style feels so much more masterful in a weird way when I'm actually doing it. This isn't me saying that line art styles that are super well connected, connect everything, aren't professional and masterful. I've been there. I love it still. It's just not really where I'm at. This is me saying that I feel like I've mastered my skill more, being able to be confident in a sketchier line and feeling as though that sketchier line expresses everything the way I want it to. Kind of like those people who are capable of drawing a silhouette in one stroke. That's a master of their skill and their kind of artistic expression to be able to execute that. Obviously, that is a well-connected line if they're doing all of that work in one solid go. And for me, being confident in my sketch is kind of my own form of kind of realizing and acquiring a greater confidence in my artistic ability. And that has been something that I've been kind of trying to embrace a lot more. One, sketchier feels a lot more kind of fun recently, but also it makes me feel like I'm expressing my artistic confidence more, and that just makes me happy. And then one thing I did learn from Procreate that I absolutely need to do, filling in your gaps. I don't trust a paint bucket tool anymore. I don't trust it, okay? I have had enough sticker designs that I've tried to do where it has just had a couple of magical pixels off in the middle of nowhere, and I am done. I refuse. I'm tired of being betrayed by the paint bucket tool. Dang it. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired of this, Grandpa. Wow, I need to drink some caffeine because I'm absolutely losing it if I'm making jokes like that on the internet, unironically. Okay, but we're going to go into the last phase of the video very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed my little yap about maybe a little bit more of the casual stuff, the art insecurity on YouTube kind of vibes, and let's go into the last phase of this experience, other than the outro, of course. Now, with a moderately questionable silhouette design, we are diving face first into a sunset kind of gradient. And the primary reason for the sunset gradient was because I was pretty optimistic that I would be able to kind of vibe with the colors enough to create something visually interesting. And it's restricted my color palette to a degree where I was pretty sure, worst comes to worst, I can probably figure something out without completely crying. So That almost immediately went out the window when I discovered the magnetic lasso tool and then tried to figure it out and then crashed and burned basically instantaneously. However, ultimately, it was fine. Anyway, going into the lasso tool, I was mostly trying to block in shadows, and so, as I mentioned earlier before, I mentioned that I completely failed in my mission. I was trying to basically gradient in an area and set it to be able to kind of, gradient within the lasso, starting at a top edge, kind of going with the direction of whatever I swiped my cursor in. And, multiple crash and burns in life later, and me having to set my lasso to be able to actually kind of have multiple at a time. I did eventually make it work, although it did take a lot of Googling to figure out why my lasso was only letting me do one lasso group at a time. Then I have yet to figure out why exactly my lasso, when I have a reference layer on, will not let me actually use my reference layer for the lasso. Fortunately, I downloaded a erase on the edge brush just for my own personal amusement because I wanted to play with it, and it actually saved my life. So, whoever made this brush, bless you. I don't know what I'm blessing you with because I don't have a faith, but bless you. You're amazing. You've made my life better. One lesson though is do not utilize it whilst you have the lasso still active because it creates a very, 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 very tiny line along the edge of the lasso line. But other than that, it was fine. And I just kind of went in and I kept trying to fill in color block areas within multiple layers of just multiply, overlay, soft light, because while I couldn't figure out exactly what I set out to do mission-wise, I figured I might as well continue to familiarize myself with the lasso, have fun, play with colors, and go until the piece just felt not fun anymore, as I was mentioning earlier. As long as you're having fun, I think it's a successful experiment, and I was not having a bad time. Which feels weird to say with how tedious it was, but it didn't feel tedious in the moment. Like, it felt totally kind of chill to just go in there and block in large areas of color. And one thing I really tried to adopt as a kind of mental philosophy was to be loose with the lasso. So I feel like a lot of the time I really try to follow my lines perfectly once I have a sketch done. But being loose with the lasso will help with my gradients in the future because theoretically the gradient should be fixing itself to the general area, and I don't need to perfectly follow every single line or I will die or something, right? That's kind of what I'm hoping, is to be more confident. And if there are little gaps where the colors don't quite fill to the line, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm still having fun and I still think it's pretty solid, so why am I stressing myself out over this? I shouldn't be. And that's kind of where I'm at. Just be loose, be expressive, be fun, and just kind of color blocking in areas. I think professional artists who do this all the time would probably really go in and refine these details, but because this is one, an experiment, and two, I am chaotic enough in my normal life that I don't even feel like this is any different from a typical day-to-day version of my existence. I'm pretty okay with it. I think it's fun. I think it looks good. I think she's hot. I think the colors really match the vibe. Well, crochet was kind of where I was mentally going with it. I think that bikini and swim fit also very much works. And so maybe future color palettes will kind of give a more crochet vibe, but this is giving kind of summer cutie. And I love her. I think that she's very expressive, she's very fun, and I might go in and make a couple variations of this sketch where she has kind of something else in her hand, maybe a bowl, not just playing with her own hair, but I love her. I think she's adorable, and adding the colors really solidified just how fun and fresh I kind of think she is, so I don't know. I really, really love it. The sketch does have its issues where if I were to I've never taken client work, to be clear, but if I were to, like, be doing this for a client, like, I would fix them before ever actually, like, submitting it. Like, the stars on her breast don't really, like, conform to the shape of a breast, because I was really focused on what a star even looks like, because I could not for the life of me figure it out. So my overall objective was to, like, make a star and not actually think, like, how would this be tying and, like, conforming around the chest, especially on the front one. So it could definitely move with the body a little bit better. Maybe I'll fix that eventually. But for now, I'm fine with it. Especially because a lot of the time I put in line work or some sort of kind of information in the form of a sketch to try and convey to myself, oh, I want to do something here, and then I will use rendering to actually do that information. So it is possible that, like, if I ever figure out my rendering, which I'm going to, but it's an if right now because it feels so distantly away from me after all of the work I've put into trying to figure out, like, the right brush for me and all of that. So overall, I think we're going to call it an if, but you can add shadow to imply the fabric, like, warping to the body a little bit more, and that would probably help fix kind of a lot of the issues in the sketch, because I'm not really used to not being able to just kind of, you know, go in and fix things with rendering, because I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing wrong yet. But I don't know. It's definitely getting better. It's definitely getting good. She's cute. I think that that's good enough. And frankly, all that really matters is that I think she's hot, right? Like, if I think I did a decent job, then I'm gonna, like, call it a win, right? To the person who commented on my last video, thank you so much, saying, like, honestly, I'm her creator and I think she's hot, so that's all that matters. And that being a vibe. Yeah, that's the vibe for this one as well. We're keeping that energy, because I think she's hot and that's all that matters, because if I crash out about the fact that other people don't like my puffy clown, like, star mini skirt girl, I will be very sad. And so I'm going to not allow myself to doubt the attractiveness of her, because I love her and I would absolutely let her, like, beat me up at my own birthday party. I don't know what clowns actually do in life. I'm scared of, like, real unironic clowns a little bit. Not notably, just enough that it's, like, kind of embarrassing. Like, oh, you're not even, like, deathly afraid. You're just, like, unreasonably uncomfortable in the presence of a clown. But if they're, like, a hot, kind of baddie goth clown, is goth the next go? Wait, I'm having a vision. It's way too late for it for obviously this video, because I have to wash cat booty again later. And I need to get this uploaded and all of that stuff. But picture it, black hair with white color blocking on the bangs and the, like, long bang pieces, and then, like, streaks, like color blocked streaks. Oh, it'd be so hot. Oh my god, I'm having a vision and I love it so much. Because I feel like a white to black gradient is just going to make a gray that's not super attractive. Not in a way that, like, hair stylists would do. So it's definitely got to be color blocked. Oh, I'm having visions and I love it. This is a great idea. I love when I have a good idea. We might go goth next. And working with black is a little bit easier for me because you can kind of color block and add more fun colors that are still pretty, like, realistic but weird. Like, I put a lot of blues in my black hair and adding, like, bright cyan highlights, which is more my vibe anyway. And so if I do that, I don't need to worry about the hair looking kind of undefined, because a solid black hair is kind of not the weirdest thing. So I think that I can also just focus on the skin and experimenting with gradients that way, which might be good. But just picture it, goth crochet clown baddie, add, like, moth tattoos, black hair, white color blocking. and studs instead of pom-poms. No, we're keeping the pom-poms, but we're adding studs somewhere. Piercings? Eyebrow piercing? What does an eyebrow piercing look like if the eyebrow isn't long enough? Like, I could do a front eyebrow piercing, but if I put one where a brow piercing usually would be, even though she has micro brows, comment if you want to see that variation of this clown girl, and I will post a short about her when she inevitably is finished. She's gonna take a little bit longer because I actually have to find a color palette I like instead of going with a preset one I found to execute a like blocky micro bang, because I don't like using stark white. I like more of a kind of cream, so I'm gonna have to like play with colors a little bit more. But if you want to see the goth baddie version, let me know. The moth tattoo will also take 30 years because I can't draw symmetrically to save my life, and I have not figured out how to flip a selection yet. I know that sounds so stupid. I don't know how to reflect a selection. I can flip my canvas, I can reflect my canvas, but I can't figure out how to reflect something I've like lassoed or copy and pasted. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't figure it out. And I've just been kind of like flipping it by just like dragging the corner so that it just like flips over. And that is not a solution for a tattoo because it'll probably end up off-sized and really funny looking. I also haven't figured out like perspective stretching yet, which is something I'm going to need to figure out. I have a long list of like things I need to learn how to do in Clip Studio Paint, and I kind of want to make a mini series about it where I just go through every Clip Studio Paint related crisis and a lesson that I need to learn in a kind of like attainable miniature kind of bite-sized way. Maybe a monthly video on every Clip Studio Paint crisis I've had in the last month would be fun. But ultimately, I think that we've talked about the lasso tool, the coloring, and all of these vibes enough, so let's move on into the outro. I will put a picture of the finished piece up so that it's a little bit more visibly accessible while I go through my outro. So let's just get into it. Thank you so much for sitting all the way through to the end of this video. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all of you who stop and sit by with me on my corner of the internet every week, especially people who are new. I have videos linked in the card or in the comments, the description down below. If you would like to see more of my work or just kind of, you know, check out other time chat with me type things. But I really appreciate you. I hope that if you did get creative, you had a good time. Ultimately, like this video if you like it, dislike if you dislike. Comment if you have anything in particular that you would like to say, advice for Clip Studio Paint, creators you recommend watching who use Clip Studio Paint for kind of like figuring out techniques and stuff like that, or tutorials that you've personally really benefited from. Ultimately, I really appreciate you. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are. With all of this being said, bye-bye!